What's up, gamers? Aaron Shack here with an episode of the Shackcast. This is episode number 33, and we'll be discussing The Flash, the new DC movie that just launched this weekend. Exciting. I have my thoughts on it, and this will not be a spoiler-free broadcast. Let me actually bring it over here. This will not be spoiler-free, so if you have not seen The Flash, the movie that's just come out over the weekend, this is your final warning. You can come back, watch the video later, give us a like, do all that good stuff. But let's go ahead and go from there. So, first big thing is that The Flash has only made a little over $55 million in its opening weekend. It's probably expected to clear somewhere between 65 million by Monday, since Monday was a holiday as well. So maybe it's cleared a little more. But this is a movie with a $200 to $220 million budget, so it might not even break its budget. It might not succeed in that sense. So it's looking like other movies like Black Adam have done better, and that Shazam that came out this year did worse. So we'll talk about a lot of things. We'll talk about sort of The Flash, the movie itself, the elements, the characters, the plot, whatever. And then we'll also kind of talk about like the broad DC universe itself and what movies are supposed to come in the future after this. What else, and what are we supposed to do about it? Should be the other thing. But it is the big leader through the weekend, so it's doing better than the other movies that are currently out. But we do know that Blue Beetle is supposed to come this year, and that Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, which is going to be the second Aquaman movie, is also supposed to come out. Whereas Wonder Woman 3 was canceled, Batgirl was canceled. And we'll just have to see where things go after that. Okay. So, and feel free to ask any questions in chat, and I'll get around to them as we go here. But yeah, just kind of starting off, initial thoughts on the movie, especially at the beginning, right? I think it was really cool that they did kind of a funny intro that was sort of showing how fast the Flash's metabolism works, and he kind of strikes his pose to run, and then, kind of has a false start and has to do it again. But really, what was one of the coolest parts of the movie was the beginning. It was really great seeing Ben Affleck's Batman on screen, and I feel like he stole the show every moment he was on screen. And it was an interesting look that they chose for him, because they went with kind of more of a dark blue cowl and cape with the gray outfit. So like, rather than going, with the black cowl and cape and then gray outfit, they kind of did the blue, really flashing back to like Silver Age Batman and stuff like that, which, I thought was really cool. But they kept a similar design, and he had some sort of bat armor, because at one point he was indeed hanging on by his grappling hook and sort of gliding down the street, and his feet were like rubbing into the asphalt and stuff like that. So, I mean, he definitely had to have some type of armor, as he was kind of bouncing all over the streets while he was hooked onto that armored vehicle. But he absolutely stole the show. His scenes were violent and gritty. The voice was great. His dialogue was a little bit more reminiscent of... It reminded me more of Joss Whedon's Justice League, where, he was kind of throwing jokes here and there and stuff, but not too much. It wasn't overly done, but it did remind me more of that depiction of Ben Affleck's Batman, which is not really great in my opinion. But then it was really cool to see Wonder Woman show up as well. But then it really took us back to some of those scenes from Joss Whedon's Justice League, where it was, like Flash fell on Wonder Woman, and they told little dumb jokes and sex jokes, and, all that kind of stuff. And the lasso of truth got wrapped around both of them, which, had some pretty funny humor there, but I felt like they just hung on to it a little too long and just made everybody feel really uncomfortable until they finally took the lasso off, and then she's like, whatever, bye. And so, I mean, I feel like if that's the last time we see those core members of the Justice League together doing their thing, maybe it wasn't the coolest, little depiction that we could have had before, the Flash actually sets forward the events of Flashpoint, which is supposed to end up resetting the DC universe here. So, going from there, we have several scenes where Bruce and Barry are kind of having this, I thought it was a really interesting conversation where they sort of had this back and forth about, Barry wanting to get his dad out of jail and potentially talking about how in Zack Snyder's Justice League he actually ran back in time and there were, like, no consequences, right? And now he's, like, thinking, he, like, accidentally traveled in time and was like, well, what if I could do that to save my mom? What if I could change one thing, which would be, getting that spaghetti sauce or whatever and putting it in her cart. That way she wouldn't forget it and she wouldn't have to send Henry Allen to go to the store and buy it, in which case she would be home alone and get murdered. And then Henry would come home and get blamed for that. So, and those were like really heartfelt movies, and that's where I think the story of this movie really pays off very strongly, is that at the beginning they created a very strong bond, and even in Zack Snyder's Justice League, they set up the murder, they set up the Flash saving Iris West from a car crash, right? So they've set up some things emotionally, but now we're getting to sort of see the family dynamic, the mother, the father, the son, all that. And they gave you like some cool moments where the mother clearly imparted some wisdom, some phrases that really stuck in Barry's mind all his life, and so he sort of gets to live this moment of like seeing his mother again, and he gets to put the sauce in the cart, and then after that he immediately sees how things change. He greets his parents. He runs into a double of himself because, essentially he's tampering with the timeline, and thus now it's created a multiverse. It's branched out rather than just creating a separate branch where, okay, in this timeline his parents are dead, and this timeline mother's alive. It actually creates a multiverse to where it breaks and branches off in several different directions, and there's several different possibilities. But in this one, he meets Michael Keaton's Batman, Tim Burton's Batman, which was really cool to see him on screen. I didn't really imagine that he would just turn into a bum. I'm not sure. That felt almost stereotypical and kind of cheesy in a way, because like that's what everyone always thinks when someone does something for a long time, like they just become a bum. But like I don't feel like that was the trajectory for Michael Keaton's Batman. Like even since Alfred was old and, he probably passed away at some point, right? And yeah, Michael Keaton's Batman like killed the Joker. He battled with Penguin, all these different things, and Catwoman and stuff like that. So I mean, he ran into some iconic villains just in his brief time in the movies, and they definitely hinted at Harvey, Two-Face and all that. And I just wouldn't see him doing that. I could see him getting jaded in old age and, kind of doing what Ben Affleck's Batman did, which was, just sort of become jaded by time, fighting crime, and it just feels like it's never ending, and it feels like you've done all this work, you lock these people up, they just keep getting out, and then they just keep repeating what they're doing, and so you get more violent in order to punish them even more, in hopes that they will actually learn. I could have seen that, or him just being like broken down from it, go the other way, where it's like, well, now it's kind of like Kingdom Come's Batman, where it's like, well, now he needs an exosuit to hold himself up because he's been doing the job for so long, and it's taken such a toll on his body, and he's so old. But, I mean, it felt like once we got Michael Keaton back in that suit, it felt like he didn't age a day, because he was kicking and punching and gliding and all this cool stuff, like he hadn't missed a beat. So, I don't know. I felt like that was cheesy and a lot of extra time wasted on, comedic humor there that was not super necessary. Like, they could have used that for more dramatic conversation and building of tension and stuff like that. So they agree that, since the universe is different, and they get a lot of good jokes in about how this universe is different, how, Michael J. Fox isn't Marty McFly, and all this different stuff, right? And you sort of slowly start to figure out that there's no Wonder Woman. Clark Kent can't be found. You find Batman. Arthur Curry ends up being a dog instead of Aquaman. Like, all these different things happen. And then they figure out, oh, okay, well, there's this Superman is clearly being held in a base in Russia, and they go there. And then they find out that instead it's a Project Superman reference, and it ends up being Supergirl landed there and was imprisoned and was being kept in sort of a red sun chamber, which would be disabling her powers, and they were probably also kind of seeping away at her life. She looked pretty skeletal, not so great. But as soon as they broke her out and got her in the sun, she regenerated and everything worked out pretty great. As far as that, I mean, I think it was really kind of an interesting dynamic having two Barry Allens, but it might have been more interesting if it wasn't the exact same person. It would have been maybe more interesting in my mind if it was Grant Gustin's Flash or any other Flash. Like, it would have been cool to just bump into any other iteration of the Flash, whether it was like Jay Garrick or John Wesley, his Flash, John Wesley Shipp, his Flash. It would have been, those would have been some cameos that would have made sense to me, rather than having two Ezra Millers, essentially going back and forth and acting out various, mostly comedic scenes between each other. But he ended up being like kind of charming and funny and witty and awkward and all these things. But I think sort of the awkward, shy, antisocial, really quirky and weird superhero, like it's being overdone at this point. The Flash is doing it. Spider-Man literally did it for 3 movies and had no character development. Like, it's, at some point I want to see Barry Allen come into his own, and maybe that's saved for a sequel or a future Justice League movie or something like that. But I don't want to see him acting like this weird, childish, loser forever. Because it seems like Iris is sort of enamored by that right now in the movie, but it doesn't, it's not going to create a good, lasting relationship between these two, if I'm saying that in the right way. But yeah, I think I wasn't super excited about Sasha Calle's Supergirl. I think the suit looked okay, but there was a lot of red here around the shoulders, and I just thought that looked weird. It would have been better if they almost made it a little more like Cavill's, and the legwork looked really cool. All the designs that they did there was kind of cool. How it was sort of this bodysuit. That's definitely a more modern take on the Supergirl outfit. Even Melissa Benoist's Supergirl switched to like a bodysuit for the later seasons. But I mean, we've seen her wear all sorts of stuff over the years. So I mean, I'm not saying it's mandatory that we had to have her wear the skirt or the one piece or any of the other, odd outfits that we've seen Supergirl in over the years. But it was weird, the haircut and the dark hair and stuff like that. It's not It's definitely not the Supergirl that we're used to, but I think there's a reason for that. And so when I, myself, and other people complain about the look, I think what we're not realizing is that this is an alternate universe Supergirl, and she was raised in this Project Superman type atmosphere here. So she's kind of meant to be like sort of this different, dark and jaded and edgy, and, you know, she's got the hair or whatever. And she has like she doesn't have that sense of, you know, being raised by human parents and stuff. You know, she doesn't get the typical Kara Danvers upraising. So it's you gotta think about it that way. It's an alternate universe Supergirl. It's not just the one that we're used to, that we've read in the comics and that we've seen on TV and that we've seen in movies all over these years. It's a very different depiction, and I don't have to like it, and I don't really like it all that much. But that is kind of the weakest part about her, is because she doesn't have that upbringing. She's not, and they make this clear in the movie, she's not used to her abilities. She's obviously very good at fighting. As soon as she busts out, you know, she's punching, kicking everybody, and probably killing all those people, to be completely fair here. But she doesn't have the training that Superman did in Man of Steel. Like, he spent his whole life honing those skills, you know, on the farm and stuff like that, and growing up and learning how to hear, you know, like every voice in the world talking all at once, you know, learning to filter that out. Same with the X-ray vision. It's a very overpowering ability to have, to where it's like, it's hard to focus, it's hard to turn it off. And kind of the same, you know, with the laser eyes and the frost breath and all that stuff. All these things have to be toned. And same with, you know, his strength, his, you know, you got to pull the punches when you're fighting humans, so you don't, you know, make them explode into a million pieces. But then you have to know how to cut loose when you're, you know, fighting other Kryptonians, for example. So that's what made Man of Steel such an interesting movie, is because Superman knew that, but he was also learning how to fight multiple threats that were actually equal to his ability, that could actually take his punches. So Supergirl didn't have those abilities, so when she's fighting Zod, who is literally just going for the kill, he doesn't have to worry about anything. That's why towards the end of the movie, in every single attempt that both Flashes tried, and they kept rewinding time trying to save her, and trying to save Michael Keaton's Batman, for example. They kept going back to save her, and she kept dying over and over, and it's because she wasn't ready in the way that Clark Kent was in Man of Steel. He was prepared. She was just really good at fighting, really tough. Yeah, by the way, Kong, we did the spoiler alerts at the beginning. This is a spoiler cast. It's all over the place. So tune out if you want to wait, because we're deep in it. We're deep in the spoiler territory. So she was not ready for the fight to be safe, and that's why Zod wins every single time, no matter the circumstance. And kind of same, it was really interesting to see Michael Keaton's Batman back in the game, and I think it was kind of fun and quirky to sort of see his different outfits that he had in the Batcave. You know, to see the Batwing again, and him flying that, and, you know, just kind of cheesily parked it in the moonlight to where it was like showing the bat symbol over the moon again, and it was really cool. His fight scenes were good. He still moved in the same way because he has no neck movement with that particular cowl on, so he's doing a lot of like moving from the chest and tilting in different directions, and you know, his fighting style was very much what you would expect. I mean, what was in those older movies, also probably inspired by the Batman Arkham games, which I think is something we saw with Ben Affleck's Batman in the warehouse fight in Batman vs. Superman. We saw a lot of moves that were very inspired by the Arkham games. See the same thing with Michael Keaton here. So, continuing from that, Michael Shannon had some comments about his Zod, and I kind of agree with this. He said that he didn't really enjoy coming back as Zod in The Flash because it didn't feel like an in-depth character study that Man of Steel was. Like, he was able to immerse himself in that character, and he really loves Zack Snyder, and he was able to become General Zod and sort of think, okay, well, this guy's not just, he's not like Terrence Stamp's Zod. He's not just evil for the sake of evil or just bad to be bad. Like, he's the last remaining general of Krypton, and he has one duty, and it's to save his people. You know, they doomed their previous planet to essentially, like, they literally polluted their planet until it exploded, to be completely fair, which is kind of what we're doing to Earth, which is why he said he found Krypton's story to be so relatable, was like, well, look what we're doing to our Earth. And so his thing is to terraform the Earth and to, you know, sacrifice all human life for the sake of bringing his own people back. It's a selfish outlook, but what would you do for your people, to be completely fair, right? So he's a bad guy, but, like, relatable in some ways. And in Man of Steel, Clark had the option, right? He had the choice. He could have said, oh, wow, I'm not the last of my people. I could totally help them, you know, make a new Krypton. But he really realizes that Krypton had its chance, and that exterminating an entire planet and an entire race of human life would be wrong. And, of course, it probably helps that Clark had all that human upbringing. But Sasha Calle's Supergirl doesn't have any of that. So for her, she immediately decides that she's going to side with the Kryptonians. But when she gets there, the first thing she sees is Zod just mercilessly killing the human army and stuff like that, and just murdering them. And she realizes, like, oh yeah, that's wrong. You know, that's not the Krypton that I know. We were not warriors. We were not killers and stuff like that. So she kind of realizes that, and, you know, maybe that's some of her uncle's upbringing, Jor-El, you know, sort of passed down to her. So she goes back and helps Barry become the Flash again. And that was kind of an interesting scene. It was very strange in some ways, but just got to roll with the punches on that one, I guess. But yeah, once again, the final battle is really about all these heroes collaborating together, and, you know, both Flashes trying to figure out how to use their abilities together to fight Kryptonians, which, you know, pretty tough people to fight. And it was really cool seeing Michael Keaton's Batman go up against them. But then you sort of started to see what was happening, was that this new Flash that was created in the Flashpoint timeline he was so determined to be a hero that he wanted to keep going back in time, trying to save Supergirl, trying to save Batman, and trying to save the Earth from Zod, that he was destroying himself in the process. He did so many retries that he was taking so much battle damage. It was affecting his psyche. And to me, he was essentially becoming Savitar in that moment. And that's what kind of makes, like, the mainline Barry Allen realize, oh shoot, I gotta stop. Like, Flashpoint is bad. I gotta put the can of tomatoes back on the shelf. There are fixed points in time, and Barry's mom dying is one of them, because it sets Barry on a whole different trajectory in his life. It makes sense. And that's where it branches off, right? So Barry realizes he has to do that. He ends up, you know, defeating his other self by essentially doing the thing that happens at the end of every Flash movie, TV show, season, is that an alternate self takes the hit, and that in turn kills the future villain self of them. It's a weird timeline thing, but it does seem to keep happening, because that's how season 1 of The Flash went as well. It was Eddie Thawne killing himself so that Eobard Thawne would never be born. And he was like his grandfather or great-grandfather. So going from there, he dies. The timelines, we get to see this awesome multiverse, which I have different thoughts on this. I am not sure about the rights of some of these characters that were shown in these different multiverses, because basically what Flash did by creating Flashpoint was creating the multiverse, and he was able to see all these different permutations of the Flash and Superman and stuff like that. And so at one point, we see him running in the time bowl or whatever you want to call it. And then we see Jay Garrick running in it. And it looked very much, and the internet has kind of called this out, they said, that looks like Teddy Sears from the Flash TV show. Because he played Jay Garrick for a while until John Wesley Shipp took over and started playing Jay Garrick. That was weird, and I was like, there might be a rights issue there, or maybe they just used archival footage, or maybe they just put like a generic dude. Like most of the scenes in that part were completely CGI at that point, and a lot of the movie was CGI, to be completely fair. A lot of the actors' faces and stuff would have a lot of CGI at some points, and it would just kind of shift in and out of that. But we got to see that, and then it went into Christopher Reeve and Helen Slater's Supergirl, and it sort of showed that Superman 78 universe. And I felt a little weird about that. It felt like just a homage to pay homage, and just to show that all these different characters are still out there doing their thing or whatever. But I'm not sure if that would have been something that Christopher Reeve or his estate would want to see. And we kind of saw the same thing with George Reeves. They showed the black and white Superman tied into Jay Garrick, and they showed George Reeves, and I'm not sure about where the rights on that hang, because it's like maybe WB owns all this, because it's like all their films and they might own the visual rights to that character, and so maybe they get away with it without any sort of permission of the actor, and it's not like they would have had a contract back then that they couldn't be created as some sort of AI, CGI puppet in perpetuity. So there's that. But then it gets kind of cool. It gets into Nicolas Cage's Superman from the Tim Burton movie that was canceled, Superman Lives, and we get to see him beating up some robotic spiders, and that was actually really cool. And I was laughing because it was funny. I mean, it's just really funny to see Nicolas Cage as Superman. He's actually going to get an appearance in Batman Superman comic series that'll be coming later this year. They actually just dropped the cover art on that today. But yeah, it was really cool to see that they had pulled that outfit out, that they had done screen tests and they had a Superman outfit, and Nicolas Cage had like the Superman mullet and all that stuff, and they ended up using that in this in the Flash. So they showed that. They also cameoed Adam West Batman and Robin. They showed like a little bit of that universe happening over here. But like things they could have done would have been like, showing John Wesley Shipp's Flash. I mean, he's been the Flash on TV for a long time, and now Grant Gustin has done it for 10 years. And, we had Ezra Miller's Flash show up on the TV show The Flash, but we never got the reverse of that. And they've been working on this Flash movie for an entire 10 years. The entire run of the TV show, they've been filming this movie, and directors have dropped out, and different things have happened, and story has been rewritten and flipped around and switched and all these things. So it's disappointing in that sense that there wasn't more collaboration, or like, where's Brandon Routh's Kingdom Come Superman? They could have made a little nod to that. They could have done a Kevin Conroy nod somewhere down the line if they really wanted to sit here and just cash in which is really what that felt like. It was just cashing in on, what the fans like to see, which is they like to hear the Star Spangled Superman theme from the 70s kick in. And it was weird because they did show Henry Cavill, but it was just him breaking through the monument shirtless from Zack Snyder's Justice League. And that was the only time we saw him in the movie, and that to me is really disappointing and kind of foreboding of maybe what the future of DC's universe is. But going on from that, we had all these various flashbacks, and it was a cool moment. It was a lot of oohing and awing and, maybe a little cringing here and there. But, some of it was really cool and really interesting. And then it sort of, once they've defeated the threat, the court case happens, Henry Allen ends up with this evidence, and what you see from the evidence is a throwback to the beginning of the movie when Barry put the sauce can in the cart. Now, future Barry has to go and realize his mistake, watch himself put the sauce in the cart, then go take the sauce out of the cart and literally have a tear-jerker goodbye to his mother, which hit, like, everybody. Everybody was crying. We're all just trying to keep it together in that moment. And he has, he's this strange boy or man that, her mother kind of recognizes him, but not really, and she just realizes that this guy misses his mother or wants to go see her or whatever. And, that hug is just what seals it. But then he has to leave, and then what ends up happening is he gets, he realizes that on that tape, and I guess this wouldn't have happened without Flashpoint. So it's almost like Flashpoint was destined to happen because it was meant to teach Barry that he had to put that back so that his father would be the one to have to go to the store, get the can of tomato sauce, and would be seen on the surveillance camera, which would be the proof that would get him out of jail. So to me, I realized like it had to be like a full circle moment. So I think it makes the story really good. It's got a really strong story. The action scenes are dope. Like, he gets to run around super speed. They slow things down so that we can, see him saving, the babies and the nurse and the dog and all these other really cool things that happen at the beginning of the movie and throughout the movie. There's a lot of really cool displays of the Flash's abilities, whether it's phasing or, just like punching and jump kicking things really fast, drop kicks and all that stuff. And then it gets to the very end, and I'll leave that for you to smile on. There's one last cameo that nobody really saw coming until you realized what was happening. And I guess our final bit of the movie is that we realize Arthur Curry is still in the DC universe because there's obviously an Aquaman 2 movie coming out soon. So it feels like that post-credits scene was changed. Some people said that Michael Keaton's Batman was supposed to be there, and that Henry Cavill and Gal Gadot were supposed to be there with their characters, and that was cut, and that's all a result of James Gunn and all these bullshit changes that I really don't agree with. And it ends up, just being a drunk Aquaman stumbling around, and to me it didn't really make sense. Once again, it's kind of the same thing about how Michael Keaton's Batman was introduced as sort of just a bumbling bum making spaghetti, and then at the end of the movie we have Jason Momoa's Aquaman. Like, why is he drunk? Like, last time we saw the Justice League, they won. Arthur Curry doesn't really have any, like, trauma. I know he's a drinker in this universe, but I mean, he doesn't have a reason to be that drunk where he's, like, falling asleep in a puddle in the street, and drowning in it. Um, that to me didn't. And I think about the way kids are probably going to watch this movie too. There was a lot of F words. There were a lot of Flash calling people dicks, which was funny, and it's surrounded by that. But then and then you have Aquaman stumbling around like a drunken bum, and so it doesn't really paint this great picture that's like really. It didn't seem like it seems like a movie that's more for the older teenagers than adults. Like I would be a little weird about taking the kids to that one, and that seems strange because these are properties that are pretty much universal and should be for all audiences, even if you're trying to do a darker retelling of something like that, or trying to tell a more adult and more mature story. There should still be moments of either levity or just like action that the kids can get in on, and maybe they don't understand all the words that are being said. But when those words to me are like cuss words or being like really edgy and sexual, then it gets a little wonky there. So, I mean, that kind of wraps up my initial synopsis of the movie and what's happening within it. But essentially, what is that Flash creates an alternate multiverse where Zod is destined to win, Supergirl and Batman are destined to die, and that Flash must reset in order for that not to happen. So what we were worried about, a lot of us who saw that Zod was going to be in the Flash, we were thinking that potentially, this movie's going to like rewrite the ending of Man of Steel. And that's not at all what it's doing. And I think that's a good thing, because Man of Steel is really good. Batman vs. Superman, Zack Snyder's Justice League, they're all really good. And they all make sense when they're put together. So, I'm not super sure that it was necessary, but it was an interesting way to weave the Flashpoint story in. And I'm kind of glad in some ways that they didn't just rehash the animated movie. I know that's what a section of DC fans would want, but I think we've already seen that. We've seen Flashpoint adapted in TV shows. We've seen it adapted in animated TV shows. We've seen it adapted as an animated movie, and it's great. And we've seen it in the comics. We've seen it in all these different mutations. It doesn't need to be a carbon copy of that, but I do think there's key moments or key characters, per se, that you might try to grab. And I think they did an interesting thing. They switched it up. They picked out, different characters here and there to come and cameo in it. But there were talks a while back about Jeffrey Dean Morgan coming back as Thomas Wayne to be that Batman. And having that might have been cooler than Michael Keaton's Batman. I love Michael Keaton's Batman. He was a great character in the film, and it made sense. They made it make sense that he was there. But, like, if they could have done that moment where Barry meets Bruce's dad and brings a letter back to Bruce, like, you could have made everybody cry on that, too. Not just Barry losing his mother, but, like, him coming back and giving Ben Affleck's Batman a letter from his dead dad. You could have done that. So, but then you'd lose Michael Keaton's Batman. So it's a catch-22. There's probably not a right answer. And it might have been okay if Batgirl hadn't have been canceled and we would have Brendan Fraser and Michael Keaton's Batman in that, which I think could potentially even be a better portrayal of that Batman there. Because a lot of the scenes from The Flash were daytime scenes, and Batman just don't work in daytime. There's a reason the guy goes out at night. He looks like a goofball when it's like 12 in the afternoon and he's, in the black suit or gray and black or blue and black suit. But it kind of worked for this movie. He gets a pass. It works. But that's part of his advantages, is fighting in the darkness and using fear and all that stuff. How does Flash meet also Flash? Well, because he created a multiverse, it meant that he was getting the future he wanted, but it wasn't for him because his timeline still exists out there, and he ended up guest starring in another Barry Allen's timeline where his mother is alive. Yeah. Yeah, and I think it would have been, dude, like Jeffrey Dean Morgan with some guns as Batman. But I also don't think audiences, just think about it, they were not ready for the amount of violence that Ben Affleck's Batman brought. People were not ready for that darkness, the grittiness, the violence, the anger that he brought, the jadedness. But also, maybe those people didn't read The Dark Knight Returns, and they, just didn't realize that. But it's ironic now that people are saying they want an adaptation of Dark Knight Returns on the screen. That's what they're hoping Michael Keaton's Batman will do someday. And I'm like, guys, we did it already. That was Ben Affleck's Batman. You gotta watch Batman vs. Superman. If you want to see The Dark Knight Returns, it's literally almost a 1-to-1 recreation, okay? They just make a few changes to make it exciting and different. Jesus. Yeah, it was kind of comical, and that was some of the things that I didn't like was, some of the jokes were really good, but there were moments where I was like, it's too much slapstick. It's too much, just like really weird comedy that gives you like secondhand embarrassment. It's like awkward. And I think it's just DC trying to copy Marvel in some ways. They look at what works. And so if they look at Zack Snyder's films and they say, okay, well, these didn't work because they were realistic and serious and they were depicting Greek gods and it's almost a superhero, biopic of some sort, and it's almost, some sort of, retelling from the comics and stuff like that. If they assume that doesn't work well, then they try the polar opposite, and it doesn't work fully. Not to say that these movies can't have humor, but I think DC should walk a narrower line with it. I think this movie did a decent job, but I think Black Adam did better in having more of the realism and the superheroes and cool stuff, but also having hints of comedy, but not letting it overtake the entire plot of the movie. Because there was like a whole section of a scene where Barry takes Barry to the police station. They like try to recreate the events that make him become the Flash. He had to make sure that his other version of himself becomes the Flash. But we realized later they didn't really need to do that because of the multiverse. That Barry Allen didn't have to be Flash for his mother not to die. But I guess it helps to be a hero and to have a Flash in that universe. So it's weird. Yeah, and they did a bunch of Back to the Future references, saying that Eric Stoltz was Marty McFly rather than Michael J. Fox, and that was funny. Like, they were saying, oh, Michael J. Fox from Footloose, and they're like, no, that Kevin Bacon is supposed to be in Footloose. And so, it ends up being that Flashpoint screws up a lot of things in the universe, right? Yeah, I think I really liked Batfleck, and yes, the extended Batman vs. Superman adds 30 minutes of extra footage, and believe me, it makes a difference. Because when I saw it in theaters, I thought it was okay. I didn't really enjoy it. I was just like, I don't know how to feel about it. But I said, let's see where it goes from here. And then when I saw the extended cut, the director's cut, Ultimate Edition is what they call it, it filled in a lot of the stuff that probably the bigwigs at DC made them cut out. to make it fit the theatrical version there. Yeah, it does suck that Grant Gustin didn't get a cameo. It sucks that John Wesley Shipp didn't get a cameo. I mean, I think they could have done more cameos or more impactful ones that would seem less like you're butchering the past or just grabbing, like you're just roping in Christopher Reeve again just to show him on screen. There's a moment there where it sounds like canned and cheesy. I don't think they did a burn victim bury. I don't know what you're getting at there. No, I doubt there will be an extended version of this. I don't know. We'll see. But I'll say not every movie needs that. But, Zack Snyder got a raw deal with DC because essentially, he had portions of BVS cut out that he put back into his own Ultimate Edition. But then when he did Justice League, DC was going back and forth. The big wigs were like, we need more jokes. Well, look at what Joss Whedon did with Avengers. Let's have him come over here and fix Justice League. And it ended up that his ideas didn't help with Justice League. And it made a worse Justice League movie in 2017, which screws up your universe even more, fucks over your fan base completely. And now people don't know what they want. They don't know what to expect. They don't like what they've seen here and there so far, and the vision is inconsistent. If they at least stuck with Snyder's vision and let it get to the end or to a logical conclusion or whatever you want to say, then you could say, oh, wow, it really wasn't good. But to be chipping away with it with a hammer as it's being done, that's like having someone nitpick over your shoulder while you're writing a song, and somebody's like, oh, that verse sucks. Oh, it doesn't work. And it's like, well, could you wait until I get my vision, my complete song out there before we say, before we go into some sort of editing phase? So that's what it must have been like. And then having, the Snyders having their daughter commit suicide during that, all of those things. You know that they were going through turmoil, and that was very difficult, and that their version of things, thank God it actually came to be, and that fans were consistent enough and persistent enough to get that out there, and that we have Zack Snyder's Justice League. And it's a great movie. It's a damn great movie. And it's a real shame that this whole universe is going to be scrapped. And I think that's why I was going into The Flash with I had a very low bar. I was like, I'll just watch it and see, expectations were low. But I think the movie was actually genuinely decent. I don't like Ezra Miller in real life. I think, that person is a criminal, and, the fact that they're not facing charges or jail time or any of that stuff, and they're just allowed to slip into therapy and then make millions of dollars off a movie doesn't really seem like a punishment, and that's not the way we want our superheroes to behave, both on screen and off screen. You have to have some sort of behavior and decorum, because people are going to see who you are, and kids are going to say, hey, isn't that the Flash? Oh, he has a cult? Oh, he does, kidnaps people? All these things allegedly? That's not what you want. You don't want your kids to be seeing Superman walking around drunk and, abusing people and stuff like that. It reflects poorly on the brand and the characters. So, the actor has to have some sort of decorum, and Henry Cavill always had that. And he's being, sort of blackballed out of it, kicked out. So, I don't know. And Ben Affleck actually had comments. He said that he actually enjoyed playing Batman in The Flash. He said it was great coming back. He said it was a role that he really enjoyed. And that he said it was easier this time because it was more of a cameo. He didn't really have to do a lot of stuff in the suit or a lot of the exhausting exercise and all that, getting super fit for the role. It was really just him standing around the suit, and a little bit of dialogue here and there. But he said he actually really enjoyed it, and that's kind of sad because I think there's a lot of people that would really like to see more of his Batman, because it's definitely an interesting portrayal. Like, Robin's already dead. Who knows what else is going on in his universe, but he's been through essentially some of the events of Dark Knight Returns, and is now him and Superman are heading up the Justice League, Like, what a cool moment to hop on and see where the story goes next. So, yeah. Let me make sure I've caught up on everything here. Yeah, they kind of did that with Michael Keaton's Batman. They did an experiment to get Barry electrocuted, but it played out a bit differently, and I think it was all right, but it just felt awkward. But it kind of worked for sure. Yeah, the Batwing was actually really dope, and I thought that was interesting that the seat and the glass is able to barrel roll, and the reason it does that is to resist the G forces. So rather than having to always tilt the entire vehicle in order to turn, he could stay level while the wings move separately. So that could potentially keep him from getting sick. And when he goes upside down in the plane, he could still be right side up in the cockpit, because the cockpit he can shoot, and obviously he uses it as a defense mechanism. He could roll the cockpit away when Kryptonians were trying to punch the cockpit open and try to get in. So I think I enjoyed the movie and found Ezra Miller's Flash to be likable. He's not my favorite Flash. I still think I like Grant Gustin the most in the role. I think his first season of The Flash and a lot of his solo episodes, even close to the end, he had some solo episodes where we really got to see Grant Gustin's acting, and it was really strong when he's allowed, instead of being part of a team and always needing everyone else's help, Team Flash, Team Arrow. That was a very formulaic thing that the CW was doing. And there were some episodes that were just stronger when it was just him and his emotions and his abilities. And you sort of got to see that character growth and development. There were more monologues and stuff like that. So Supergirl, I think her performance was fine. I discussed a lot of her fight scenes throughout and how she wasn't prepared to fight Zod in the way that Superman was in Man of Steel. And so, she ends up she was an angry fighter, and, I just didn't like her look or her vibe as much. But, she was, I don't know. It was definitely a Project Superman homage, but not really the Supergirl we wanted. And, in Man of Steel, there was a scene where he discovered the Kryptonian ship, and he saw there was an empty bed there, right? When he was going through stuff. And that was implied that was Supergirl's right there, and that she had arrived on Earth before Clark did. So, that was Zack sort of, just sort of putting little Easter eggs in. But this is not the Superman of the universe that we become used to. It's not the Supergirl that goes with Henry Cavill and Ben Affleck and all these others, right? This is an alternate universe, Kara Zor-El, where she didn't grow up with the Danvers family. She was, captured and put in a red sun cage and kept there, and she was jaded, and all she knew was anger and violence. So, but she was not trained enough in her abilities, because they never really said how long she had been in there. But she's obviously 20s, somewhere in her 20s at this point. So there's no telling, but that means she doesn't get the human upbringing that is so key to Clark and Kara growing up. So they miss out on that, which is something that hones their humility, it hones their powers, their understanding of their place in the world. It's only at one point when she sees Zod killing humans that she realizes that that's not what Kryptonians would do. And she disagrees with Zod's strategy. So, I mean, there was a point there where it was, like, really close. And it was like, oh, we were about to get, like, full-on Supergirl joins the Kryptonians and the whole world gets terraformed. You know what I mean? Yeah. It definitely... The animated movie did it differently. And, of course, they did it with Superman. But yeah, I think they kind of wanted to throw us a curveball, and obviously they didn't want Henry Cavill involved for some reason. So, I mean, all his scenes got cut. So that's probably why we got Supergirl instead. And they probably thought it'd be an easy, high five with all the feminists out there. But I'm not saying she's bad in the movie or a bad choice, but it was just a very different thing. Very different approach. And I love Supergirl, but this was not the one I wanted to see on screen. But it was also an alternate universe, so I think you have to understand that. That's why it's not the tried and true blonde-haired Supergirl in the skirt or whatever outfit you imagined her in your precious little mind. This is an imprisoned, a dark, Supergirl that's, and that's why I guess she's got the short hair and why it's dark hair instead of blonde. I don't know. They just wanted to create they did the bangs on the sides so she could look all dark and edgy like Leon in Resident Evil 4, just sort of that whole thing. Well, I mean, there kind of was a boss fight with Dark Flash, to be fair. I mean, there was a whole fight at the end. I mean, it didn't really need to be too drawn out because it's literally him fighting the future of, let's call it Barry B. Barry B is Barry Allen B is the one from the new timeline that's created with his mother who lives. And he keeps trying to rewrite the ending of the movie, and he essentially does it so many times that he becomes a Dark Flash, which essentially ends up looking a lot like Savitar, which I thought was really interesting that he had to go back in time to catch Barry Allen A and knock him out of the time bowl so that he would actually make him into the Flash, which would fulfill his destiny. He had to make sure that happened. I don't know, it's crazy. But I mean, that was kind of the ending I expected. Once I saw him and once I knew very quickly who that was, and I was like, oh shoot, he's gonna have to die. And young Flash B is gonna have to sacrifice himself in order for the future iteration of himself to die. So that in the end, Barry can let things go and let his mother go and realize he has to live in his timeline, his multiverse, his future, and that some things are set in stone. But yeah, I mean, overall, I think it's an okay to good movie. I don't think it's the greatest, but I think it's better than I thought it was going to be. I enjoyed it more than I thought. I think I'm getting a little jaded on superhero movies as much as I love them. I still need to catch up on the last couple Marvel films. I haven't seen Ant-Man, and I haven't seen, what was the other one? See, I can't even remember them all, Oh, I haven't seen Shazam either, so I need to watch that. But, here's the other big concern, is not only are we drowning in superhero films, and they're all starting to become the same, but James Gunn made a massive mistake right now. just before Black Adam comes out, he announces that he's, DC is courting him and talking about, having him head up DC as they're looking for a new guy. And he gets on board, and he says, oh yeah, that Henry Cavill scene at the end of Black Adam, no, not gonna happen. He doesn't exist to me. I'm gonna get a new Superman. So he announces all these changes that he's going to do, but the dumbass doesn't realize, and I'm being nice here, he doesn't realize that you have The Flash, you have Aquaman 2, we did have Wonder Woman 3, we did have Batgirl, we had all these movies queued up and ready to go. I've seen Spider-Man No Way Home. I haven't seen Across the Spider-Verse. But yeah, we have these 4 DC movies, 2 of which are canceled. So now we have The Flash and Aquaman. And Shazam. What do you mean, 5? Okay, so we got Flash, Aquaman, and Shazam movies that come out this year, right? He's doomed the box office hits of all 3 of these movies because he basically said these 3 movies don't matter because my universe starts afterward. I don't understand how nobody at WB went fucking nuclear when he made that tweet, Because literally that tweet has destroyed the box office numbers. The Flash has only made just about $55 million over the weekend. That's not great. It's not bad, but it's not great. And it needs to make over 220 million just to break even. And usually they've said if a movie doesn't, it needs to make a little more practically for it to actually achieve that goal. So we'll see. Maybe word of mouth of the first weekend will carry a bunch of people to theaters. Maybe the hype will build now that the trailers are pumping out and people are discussing the movie and everybody wants to go see it, so they can either watch it or they can enjoy it one way or the other. Right. But I don't know. We know that Black Adam did really well in theaters, but didn't get a sequel, didn't get to carry on the DC universe we know and love. And Ant-Man tanked, and Shazam tanked, didn't do very well. Now The Flash is not doing incredibly well, and I think that's a little unfair, but Michael Keaton is not enough to carry the whole movie. He only shows up a little bit. Yeah, and Amber Heard appears, I think they had cut down a lot of her scenes, for sure. But yeah, the Batgirl incident, that's ridiculous. Like, that's just Zaslav saying that he just didn't think it was up to the quality of the DC universe. And it's like, the DC universe, you're not the one to really judge that. Like, it's okay if we have different movies or different movies of varying quality up and down. Like, Batgirl, to me, that would be like one of the coolest movies. I'd really enjoy seeing that right now if it came out. I mean, not only do we have an incredible female superhero, but you had the chance to give us Michael Keaton's Batman and freaking Brendan Fraser as Firefly. Like, and he was saying it was dope. Brendan Fraser, I trust him more than some random executive. And he said the movie was dope and that he really enjoyed it. And that it was great seeing all these characters on screen. And of course, the 2 brothers that directed the movie, they were super excited. So, I mean, it's a real damn shame that we haven't seen Batgirl. So, I mean, really, if anything, that needs to be leaked, or it needs to be, officially released somehow, even if it's a direct to HBO or Max, as they call it now. Or pop it in theaters. That would be a movie where Michael Keaton could do numbers, and he could really drag people in. people are not invested in the Flash because James Gunn went on Twitter and said, "Well, none of these movies really matter because I'm scripting my own universe." So I mean, he just killed the fan base and basically gave you no reason to go see these movies in theaters. And maybe these movies will do better when they hit video and streaming services. You know, maybe people are just saying in reaction to The Flash, maybe they're saying, yeah, this doesn't look like a movie that's worth the ticket or whatever, you know? Yeah, Batwoman, that's a little different. That's CW. Ruby Rose had a back injury on the set, but they were also having disagreements as well. And I think even Ruby said that she didn't realize how stunt heavy that role is. And, obviously they have stunt women for the fights and things like that. But, she was doing some of it, and she wanted to be involved in some of it, clearly. But, she found herself getting injured, and, she claimed abuse by some of the higher-ups that were running the production, and things didn't work, and she ended up getting recast, and rather than finding a different version of her character, they chose to, completely swap out the role, So, and after that tweet, I feel like I don't want to pay theater prices for any of Gunn's cinematic universe. Yeah, I mean, I'm not inclined to support it. I think he's done good movies. Like, the Guardians of the Galaxy have been great. I actually enjoyed The Suicide Squad. I think it was a good movie. But I don't know how easily I'm going to get on with the James Gunn Superman. Because I think ever since he came on to DC, all we've seen is kind of dick joke style humor about Batman and Superman and Aquaman. Basically, all these other characters are dissing them, whether it's in the Suicide Squad or Peacemaker or even in the Flash a little bit. There's just people there throwing jokes about the Justice League and trying to belittle them and make them sound like a bunch of jerks when they're literally the world's greatest heroes. Gunn just has a different approach, a different style of humor. So, I don't like it. I don't like it so much. But, those are the thoughts there. Yeah, I mean, I ended up watching all of the Batwoman show. I don't think it was very good. And I don't think the actress that they got to play Batwoman after Ruby, I'm sure she's a fine actor, but it just never landed. I mean, it just didn't make sense. They just kind of made the original character disappear or die, and it just didn't make a lot of sense. It was very odd. And yeah, just something else to me about James Gunn that rings a little strange is his weird beef with Henry Cavill. And he says there's no beef with him, but he says, I never hired him, so he can't be fired. And it's like, yeah, but previously he was Superman. So, he's part of the universe. So, you gotta keep going with him unless you're not going to, in which case you fire him. But he says he was never hired. So he kind of just has that attitude of a high school teenage girl where it's like, you don't exist. I don't like you. So you don't exist. I'm just gonna pretend you're not there. It's like he's giving him the silent treatment, It's just a very weird thing. There's a very weird beef or some weird story there. Maybe he got slighted, or maybe he's upset that Henry Cavill got some role, or maybe he just really hates his depiction of Superman, and that's kind of attached on to him as a person as well. Maybe it's latched onto that. I have no idea. But it's a little crazy. But gamers, if you have enjoyed our conversation here, the Shackcast episode 33 covering The Flash, hit that like button and get in any last-minute questions you have, questions, concerns, comments, and we'll begin to wrap things up. But I think it ended up being a good movie, and I kind of talked about this a little earlier, but I can separate the art from the artist. I was curious to see this movie. I don't like how Ezra Miller behaves in real life, but nevertheless, I watched the movie and I found some enjoyment in it, and I think it's a movie worth buying. I think I'll have it on the shelf, even if it's, the last of a bygone era of DC, but it seems like the transition is just going to get weirder and weirder, because it didn't really completely erase the DC universe we know. It did make me want more Snyderverse, because it almost proved that you can still do cool things with Ben Affleck's Batman, because he stole the show for the first act of the movie. And the same with Wonder Woman. She showed up a little bit. And even that short cameo that she had was amazing, because they put her theme on. And that theme always gets people quaking. And, of course, we saw him doing more of the Flash, which I think he's pretty good at. He's not my favorite Flash, and I wish it would be someone else, but, he actually was good. I don't like his approach to Barry Allen, which feels a lot like how Tom Holland approaches Spider-Man. It's all the weird, awkward ADHD teenager with the tics and he's too shy and too scared to talk to girls, and he's messy and he's awkward and he has anxiety and all these things, and it just piles on a little too much, and it just seems like we're watching the same origin stories over and over when everybody's got to be the same dumb, awkward teenager, and it's just cringe at this point. So yeah, it did make me want more. Like, it showed that, hey, as long as you stick with someone's vision and you make movies on these characters and they're all cohesive and make sense, which, this one kind of throws a wrench in the works in some ways, but I do plan to see. I want to see Gran Turismo, probably not in theaters. I'm not. Really, comic book movies are like the only ones that bring me to theaters. Blue Beetle looks dope though. Yeah, that one looks good. Yeah, I was awkward and scared or like weird around girls when I was young, but like, we're literally, like, how old is he now? It's like he's graduated college. You can't still be this whiny little punk. And it's kind of the same with Peter Parker. He did that for 3 freaking movies. Homecoming, Far From Home, which Far From Home was abysmal with all that ridiculous, awkward teenager stuff. And, I'm too scared to talk to girls, all those things. Yeah, and I can't believe Aaron Taylor Johnson is showing up in a Craven movie. But yeah, we got that for 3 movies with no development for Peter Parker to somehow grow some confidence and become into the man that we know as Spider-Man, in his later years. But maybe that's where Part 4 takes us with him. But kind of with the Flash, it's like we already had him with the Justice League, and now he's getting his solo movie, and he just spends like almost half the movie, being an immature little asshole. So I mean, I think we saw some character growth, but by the end of the movie, I really wanted to see more, or whatever the next movie is that the Flash shows up in. I think it would be good to see some sort of growth in his character, some sort of trajectory, for sure. But yeah, if there's no more questions, we'll wrap it up there. But yeah, these have been my thoughts on The Flash, and I'd like to thank you all for coming in with the questions and the comments. Overall, I think it's a good to okay movie. pretty enjoyable. I don't like that it's essentially probably going to reset the DC universe, and it's a little unclear about where it's going forward. But maybe other movies will give us clues, and maybe, I mean, we'll probably have to wait till 2025 and we see the Superman movie and go from there and see, is the universe completely starting from scratch, or is it going to be just a different Superman and a bunch of other familiar characters? But I do think it's clear that James Gunn has completely destroyed the next couple of movies that are coming. He tanked Shazam, he tanked Flash. Aquaman's probably not going to do super great either, because, you know, James Gunn just put it out into the ethos that, you know, the DC universe is a ticking time bomb until his movie comes out, and only him and the people he puts in place will succeed, you know? So, once again, thank you all for watching. Take care, be safe, hit that like button. Thank you for listening if you're on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Thank you guys for watching over here on the YouTube. This has been a live episode of the Shackcast, episode 33, where we talked about The Flash. So, yeah, I have no clue what they're going to do. That seems like a wild tweet that they probably should have pulled and said, hey, man, you can't say this because this, you know, saying things like that affects our stock prices. It affects ticket sales. It affects a lot of things. You can't just go wilding out because you're the head of DC, you know? Yeah, there you go. But, yeah, no Green Lantern because, you know, Ryan Reynolds, you know, just messed up, you know, when he gave it a crack. But I think a Jon Stewart Green Lantern would have been dope, and Snyder even had a vision for that, too. He even had an actor ready to go. So, there you have it. So, once again, everyone, take care. Thank you for watching and listening, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye.